So our next coastal case study we want to look at is Barton-on-Sea. Okay, again in the UK, looking at kind of cliff collapse, the reasons behind that and the impacts. So if we start off just drawing ourselves a cliff. Now, what we're going to look at first is the causes for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use two colours. I'm going to use a grey pencil to mark out the kind of human causes of cliff collapse, and then a green pen to mark out the physical causes. So really in human causes there aren't a huge amount of them. Primarily it's the constructions of buildings on the cliff tops. Okay, these add increased weight and therefore put more demand on the cliff to support it, which has led to a certain degree of cliff collapse. This has been aided by things such as footpath erosion on the tops of the cliffs as well. Now, in terms of physical causes, this is where Barton-on-Sea is slightly more complex. So, firstly, what we need to remember is that the majority of the Barton cliffs are made of something called the Barton clay. It's an incredibly soft rock that is very easily eroded. It's eroded to such an extent that we're losing around 2 metres per year of cliff at Barton-on-Sea. Now these soft cliffs are really subject to large amounts of mass movement. Things just slumps and slides, and also mud flows where the material kind of moves down in a more liquid kind of fashion. Now this is quite common on most cliffs. What unfortunately makes Barton even worse in terms of its vulnerability to cliff collapse is the structure of the cliffs. The cliffs, as I said, are made of Barton and clay, but that is mainly actually at the bottom, and above that are sandstones. Now those sandstones are permeable, they allow the water to infiltrate through it. However, the clay is impermeable. So what happens is the sandstones become saturated and very heavy, full of water, and have a layer of water, kind of like a film of water, forming between them and the Barton clay. That then results, combined with this extra weight from being saturated, in the sandstone basically just slipping off in a process called rotational slip. Slipping off the clay and therefore causing cliff retreat. So now we want to look at the impacts of cliff collapse or cliff retreat at Barton-on-Sea. Obviously, similar to the coastal flooding, we're going to see people moving away from the area, resulting in a breakup of communities. Barton-on-Sea is already and will continue to suffer from a population decrease. On top of that, people are obviously going to lose their homes and belongings. That's something that's obviously maybe of sentimental or economic value. Other issues in terms of for house owners is that the value of their houses is going to decrease. People are unlikely to want to buy houses that have got the potential of falling off a cliff. It also means getting mortgages and insurance for these properties is very difficult. In terms of other economic impacts, we've got to think about the impact it's going to have on businesses in the area. For example, Barton Golf Course and the Caravan Park, Barton Caravan Park, have already seen, severe impacts on their business. The golf course had to redesign its 18th hole, whilst the caravan park has had to move many of its permanent caravans back away from the cliff. Other things such as hotels in the area. There's a hotel called the Clifftop Hotel that is at the moment looking into the cost of defending its part of the coastline as it's getting closer and closer to the edge. The issue for people and social impact is the fact that the roads that are built along the cliff top, which are also partly responsible for causing the erosion, have had to be shut or moved to avoid parts of the cliff that are particularly vulnerable. This means getting in and out of the area is becoming increasingly difficult. The footpath, that, as we said, the footpath erosion has contributed to the cliff collapse. That has also had to be redirected several times to avoid cliff collapses or very weak parts of the cliff. So what can be done in terms of management? It's unlikely that you're going to be asked a specific example of how management has been used at Barton, but the stuff that we learned about hard and soft engineering obviously ties in very well with cliff collapse. And so we've got strategies such as creation of seawalls, an example of a hard engineering strategy. Very effective in the short term, but normally criticised for the fact that they're very expensive, can be £4 to £7 million for a mile, and being normally quite ugly and therefore putting off maybe visitors, not fitting in with the natural environment, and generally being quite short term. Other strategies of hard engineering include rock armour, so the putting of large rocks in front of the base of the cliffs that are normally hard and resistant to erosion. Again, slightly cheaper this time than hard engineering, but again relatively short term and criticised for being ugly. We also had the construction of groins across the beach that stopped the process of longshore drift. Big advantage of these is that they are much cheaper than things such as seawall, and because they stop longshore drift, they actually create a beach which can obviously attract tourists. Problem is, however, that again can need constant maintenance. They don't defend continuously along the coast, and mainly it also just pushes the problem further along, because if you're stopping longshore drift in front of your cliffs, that means cliffs further on the coast will not have a beach to protect them, so it only shifts the problem along. We then have soft engineering strategies. So our soft engineering strategies might include things like beach nourishment, where you make the beach bigger by maybe dredging sand from the seabed. Big advantage of that obviously is that it's very attractive, it makes a large beach, fits in with the natural environment, so therefore attracts more tourists to the area. Minehead's a nice example of that. Butland spent a large amount of their money on the construction of a beach in front of their holiday camp at Minehead, and have benefited massively from the increase in tourism. Disadvantages of it, however, relatively expensive at about £4,000 per square metre, and normally doesn't work on its own. Normally beach nourishment needs the constructions of groins with it to stop that material being washed away by longshore drift. Another nice example of soft engineering is dune regeneration. Okay. Dune regeneration, it's a really nice example again of how you can use soft engineering strategies. Dunes are a natural way of protecting the coastline. So by helping the natural sort of process of dune building, you can build up dunes in front of your cliffs, which will then absorb the majority of the wave energy. Creates a new habitat, which again is very beneficial, quite rare in the UK, and again are very attractive and attract tourists. However, not a short-term solution. They take a long time to build up, and if you need immediate protection, probably not the thing you want to be doing. And then finally, you've got managed retreat. This is basically where we decide that we're going to allow an area of coastline to be eroded or to flood, and we don't spend any money on defending it. It's normally done on a cost analysis. We work out whether or not that land is worth protecting. So, for example, a town there can be quite a lot of money in terms of compensation, and a lot of people can be unhappy about there being no coastal protection, so we normally wouldn't allow that to be retreated. However, maybe an area of scrubland or farmland, more likely to allow it to be flooded.